Mulvaney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Administrator Mills, thank you very much for doing this. At the risk of repeating what may have been said, I apologize for being a few minutes late. But I want to thank the Chairman and the Ranking Member for giving me and Mrs. Congresswoman Chu the opportunity to have a field hearing last week in the San Gabriel Valley, where Mrs. Chu is the representative. And instead of asking questions, I'd like to report back briefly to you on what we heard, because it was very educational for me. This was an area that is literally driven by small business, that takes up an inordinate size of the economy in that part of Southern California. There are very few large national Fortune 500 companies, but a very, very active small business community, entrepreneurs, in large part from the immigrant community. And here's what we heard. We had small business lenders there, small banks, and one of the things they told us was that they were doing lots of lending to small business, but no small business lending. They were not using any of the programs that were available to them. And when we asked them why, they said it was too hard. And they said that the large banks were doing it. I mean, really what the large banks had done is put together teams of professionals who did nothing but small business lending. So the Wells Fargo, the Bank of Americas of the world, they would have small business units because it was a specialty, and it had to be a specialty because it was so complex. And they didn't have the human capital or the money available to develop that area of expertise. So they asked us to please do whatever we could to simplify the process. We also heard that one of the things they focus on is microlending. They do a lot of microlending. We heard some great stories about loans under $100,000 and how successfully they had been used. And when I asked them if they knew about the small business microlending program, one of the things they said was they had looked at it, but that the paperwork for a $50,000 loan was almost the same as the paperwork for a $1 million loan. And in terms of a return on the time and the investment that they had to make into setting up that loan, it simply wasn't worthwhile. So they asked us to please take a look at anything, if anything, at looking at making micro-lending somehow streamlined so that they could do more of these things. And again, this was a large majority of the loans they were issuing to the businesses in that area were under $100,000 and $150,000. We also learned about the difficulties of opening a small business development center. That area had lost its SBDC in the recent past, and there were a couple of organizations that were interested in reopening it, only to find it was going to take at least 3 years to go through the paperwork necessary to open a new SBDC. And one of the things that we suggested, or that Mrs. Chu and I talked about, is maybe suggesting to you a grandfather process. So if there was an organization that was an SBDC that closed, that maybe they could be put on a fast track to reopen, since they've already gone through the process at one point in the past. I guess the last thing that we heard was that many of them had not heard of many of the programs that you offer. They were not aware of the mentor-protege program. Only one of them even had ever been to the SBA website. So I don't know what you all are doing in terms of outreach to these small community banks. And maybe they dismiss it because of their impression that it's too difficult to work with the SBA because of past history. Again, I'm not laying any blame here. That's not the point of the presentation. But that if the opportunity exists to reach out to educate these lenders, because again, the basic message I took away was that they are lending to small business and they want to do more, but they are not using any of the tools that are made available to them through the Small Business Administration. So again, not a question, a comment back from the field, and I appreciate your attention. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.